The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, and welcome to the webinar. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. We're waiting for a few more participants to join the room. Hi, welcome to Eagle Point Funding's webinar, Why Go Federal? We'll be getting started in just a minute or two. We're waiting for one or two more participants to join the room. Okay, welcome to Eagle Point Funding's Why Go Federal webinar. We're going to be discussing an insider's look at federal grants for R&D and for the private sector. In this webinar, we're going to be covering a number of things, but two main factors we're going to be covering is why go federal? And within that, we'll discuss how the federal system works and how it may or may not be relevant for the type of research and development that your company conducts. And we also to be discussing Eagle Point Funding strategy and the unique service which has led to such success in securing federal grants. I'm Josh Barone. I'm the Director of Business Development for Eagle Point Funding. And what we do is we assist companies to receive these federal funds, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Let's start with a comic. This is a Dilbert comic. And of course, everything that's related to funding has to include Dilbert, where Dogbert, the venture capitalist, is making a very nice gesture, offering this young entrepreneur a contract in which he will get all of the special decorative non-equity stock, while Dogbert himself will keep all the common stock. Now, jokes aside, venture capital is for sure, as well as angel investors and the standard capital route, to find funding for your R&D is often necessary. However, it comes at a very high price. And if it's used too often, it comes at a very, very high price. So let's take a look at how dilutive funding, of which venture capital, angel investors, bank loans, etc., are all part of, as opposed to non-dilutive funding or federal grants. In dilutive funding, it's called such because this type of funding dilutes the equity as well as the control you have over your company. Non-dilutive funding is called as such because it does not dilute the control or the equity or potential revenue of your company. Let's look at some of the examples as they come across. Dilutive funding, seen on the left side of your screen, involves a transfer of equity in the form of either royalties, percentage of profit, shares in the company when the company goes public, or interest. That's in the case of bank loans. You're paying interest back in order to get over the investment you accepted from the bank institution. As opposed to this, federal grants and other non-dilutive funding options involve zero equity sharing. Another example, by the way, of a non-dilutive funding option would be if your family gave you the money and good health to say, go start your business. In addition to that, dilutive funding comes with advisors or additional board members. As opposed to that, on non-dilutive funding, federal agencies are encouraging company owners and their teams to do as they see fit and to bring their research to life. In dilutive funding, there may involve a transfer of IP rights. That is not the case in the federal grant system. The federal government is not interested in acquiring the rights to your company, to your research or anything else which is yours. So the first reason why one should consider federal funding as an option for their funding of their R&D is because it offers unique level of freedom. So why does the government do it? It almost sounds too good to be true. Well, the government has a vetted interest in building a strong economy, and a strong industry will lead to a strong economy. And on top of that, the government's job is to improve the quality of life for US citizens. And they believe by encouraging the development of new products, of new technology, of new medicine, that it will achieve that goal. On top of that, the government views it as a business opportunity as well. For every federal dollar that the US government invests in R&D, they see back a 2+ fold investment. That is, their ROI is $2.30 for every dollar they invest. This is because they create more jobs, less people on welfare. They create more export, which is more taxes. They create more salaries, which is also more taxes. So the ROI for the government makes it a worthwhile investment. So how much is actually available? I think the numbers may surprise some of you. The federal budget for R&D in 2017 was over $140 billion. That's a crazy amount of money. Now, not all of this was for the private sector. Roughly $60 billion was available for R&D research in the private sector. The 2018 budget, if passed by Congress, is looking to be over $150 billion for R&D. So the opportunity here is immense. There's a lot of money available in the federal system. What does it provide my company with? Well, first and foremost, federal grants cover long-term R&D financial support. The federal government is in no rush. They're patient and they want you to succeed in developing your new technology. They cover direct costs as well as facilities and administration. So that could be the rent or the rent of materials, the purchasing of materials. It includes manpower. It also includes secondary contractors. Basically, it covers all of your R&D costs. So with financial security for the long run, that's the clear direct benefits. But there are indirect benefits which are potentially even more impactful than the direct benefits. You see, federal grants are a stamp of approval. They're even the hallmark of quality. If the federal government views your R&D as cutting edge and with tremendous upside to help the American economy and the American people, then investors will start thinking the same. In fact, this was research that was conducted by the Milken Institute for actually investments coming from the NIH. And they found for every dollar that the federal government invested in the private sector, those companies netted $8.38 from private investors. So that's eightfold opportunity once you've actually received federal funding. Investors believe in the upside of your technology or the upside of your product or your research, and you can net big funding which goes far beyond the scale of the initial investment, which we already discussed was large enough to begin with. Federal funding is available in pretty much every industry. Here you see a list of the 25 total federal agencies and their icons here on the bottom of your screen. It goes beyond just defense. It includes energy, science, homeland security, commerce, agricultural, education, transportation, you name it. And this is the breakdown of the budget. When we look at the federal budget, we see, as we mentioned earlier, was $142 billion. Here, it was a more generous estimate of $150 billion. Roughly half of that goes to the Department of Defense, but it's worth noting here that even the Department of Defense is not developing exclusively weapons. They're interested in cybersecurity. They're interested in advancing technology as a whole, and they believe that by doing so, it'll be better for the defense of America as well. After the Department of Defense, we see the Department of Health is second with $30 billion worth of funding per year to distribute as they please. Department of Energy with nearly $17 billion. NASA with over $12 billion. NSF with over $6 billion. USDA, as we mentioned before, agriculture with over $2.6 billion annually. Department of Commerce with nearly $2 billion, and all the other agencies we discussed before have a budget of roughly $6 billion to invest as they see fit. It's important noting here, these are numbers of last year, 2017. These aren't magical numbers. This is funding that went to companies very similar to yours. In fact, it might have already gone to your competition. So 2018 has a tremendous amount of opportunities, which could be fit for your company and for your R&D needs, and it's worth taking a look at. So why us? Eagle Point Funding, as we mentioned, are grants and contract specialists. We help the navigation of the federal system. We help identify multitude of opportunities which is fitting for the R&D of your company, and we have a strategy which we execute. A little bit more about us. We specialize in non-dilutive funding, as I mentioned, and our company was established in 1999 we're part of the FreeMind Group, which includes a number of different companies, all specializing in non-dilutive funding. We employ over 60 full-time employees, which include the business team, analysts, project managers, and grant writers. And we work with a very diverse client base. We work with companies that are small and just have a product idea, the early stages of development, as well as large corporations with established ideas and maybe even with established research, which just needs a final push in order to get out to the market. And we have an excellent track record of success, raising over $1.5 billion in total awards to date. Our core services breaks down into two main components. First and foremost is the strategic assessment. Here, our analysts understand what your R&D needs are, the scope and the potential impact that your product, future software, or whatever you are developing could have for the American society. And our researchers then go and identify 5 to 10 grant opportunities. We also help to prioritize these opportunities for those which are best fit for your research. On top of that, we have a grant writing team. We're skilled at creating a very compelling case which focuses and highlights both your past successes and your potential impact that you could have. And our multi-submission strategy nets our probably the highest component of our success is the result of not stopping at one submission, but going for another one and another one and another one in order to lead to the highest success rate possible. It's really important to know that it's hard to navigate the bureaucracy of the federal system. And that's why it really helps having a partner like us to begin with. As I mentioned before, there are 25 different federal agencies. Each one has multiple subdivisions. Let's take DARPA for an example. DARPA is the Defense Advancement Research Projects Agency. A little history about them. They were actually founded as a response to the Soviets launching of Sputnik by President Eisenhower. in 1958. And their mission statement maintains that they want to have technological and scientific advantage over the different countries of the world, even when it goes beyond military needs. So why do we bring in DARPA as an example? DARPA is a large agency within a much larger agency, the Department of Defense, and they have 6 different technical offices. So when you apply for a federal grant, you need to know first and foremost which is the mother agency to start with, and beyond that you need to know where to look within the subdivisions and the sub-subdivisions. And we know how to do that. We know how to navigate the bureaucracy of the federal system. And we also know what type of federal grants we should be looking for. There are, in a broad sweep of things, 3 types of federal grants. There's solicited, which are for a very specific niche of research. There's unsolicited, which is more general, but within still a specific field. And then there are broad agency announcements, which are the most broad, and that's why the name is contained within the title. They offer a very, very wide range of opportunities within a given grant. Here you could have cybersecurity, drones, autonomous cars, you name it, all underneath the same grant opportunity. It's a large sum of money which could go to multiple different uses depending on how the officer in charge of allotting the grants decides. There's also backdoor to funding routes, which is really with the small businesses. The federal agencies are interested in promoting small businesses, and that's why SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research, has an allotted quota of all grants. STTR also has a quota of grants. That's Small Business Technology Transfer Research. This is for all R&D, which needs the help of certain information which lies in a public institution such as a university. So the federal agencies will fund a partnership between a private company and a public institution like a university in order to advance your R&D. So we know where your best opportunities lie, and we direct you through this process seamlessly. Let's take a look at SBIR or STTR. Within that, there are different phases and different tracks which you can apply for, with different max awards, with different length of funding, and make a declaration that you need to be at a certain technical readiness level in order to apply. Phase 1, as you see, has a max award of $125,000. But if you apply for phase 2 at a later stage, you have the ability to receive upwards of $1 million. This length of funding for the phase 1 is only 6 months, whereas phase 2 is supposed to take you to the next stage of 1.5 years. As I mentioned, technical readiness level, that's a key component when applying for a grant. Phase 1 for the SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research, is only available for research that has not yet surpassed a technical readiness level of 4, whereas 4.2 sometimes doesn't allow for research beyond a 6. Beyond that, there's the fast track, where you apply for phase 1 and phase 2 together. It's important to understand what type of funding you can get when you apply towards the right track for you. And this is only within SBIR, STTR. There's also the different grant agencies that we mentioned before, the BAAs, not for small businesses. But this is a backdoor option which many like to use, but it's important to know which phase you're at. Beyond that, you need to know what your window of opportunity is. It helps to to know that solicited grants have a short window of opportunity. They're only available for usually 2 to 6 months, where you need to make a sprint in order to apply and submit your grant on time. BAAs are different. This opportunity is available on a rolling admission of a 5-year period. In some ways, it's first come, first served, but there's so much money available there that you can really receive substantial funding at pretty much every level of the process. This submission to award takes 1 year. And this is important to know because this is a tremendous opportunity, and we're with you for the long run. And we don't stop here. We continue with you all the way through the different navigating and all the different processes that you take until you finally get a BAA. Like I mentioned, a rolling admission over a 5-year period. It's good to know the ins and outs. In this way, Eagle Point has a bird's eye view, sorry for the pun, as well as boots on the ground, because you need to know the behind the scenes for something like a BAA, a broad agency announcement. What types of projects have already received funding? Are those projects similar to my project? And if so, then maybe I shouldn't apply for this BAA. Maybe I should apply for somewhere else. By the way, this information almost doesn't appear anywhere. You really need to have an insider's view in order to know what type of projects have already received funding to date. How much funding remains? It's open over a 5-year period. Maybe we're at the very tail end and there's only small change around available. And maybe that's also not worth it for me to invest my time in a limited opportunity. What are the benchmarks? What other type of R&D projects have received funding? That'll give me an indication of whether or not I measure up. So, in summary, we know what's happening behind the scenes. And that helps tremendously for navigating the grant process. Take a look at our team. We're a team with 20 years of experience. Our teams consist of analysts and a technological expert. This is key in order to fully understand the scope of your research and to identify relevant grant opportunities for your research. That research and grant fit is key to receiving and substantial awards. We also handle the administrative and technical registration process, which sometimes can take up to 6 weeks. We have grant writers who work together with your primary investigator in order to write a compelling grant. As I mentioned before, we focus on past successes. We find the right fit between the federal agency and the person placed in charge of those funds of the federal agency with your type of research. We add on subcontractors, and we present your technology on a very competitive level. On top of that, we also have a project manager who oversees the process. Our keys to success are easy from our perspective because we recognize the multitude of opportunities that are available. We know the federal system. We understand the grant process and the ins and outs and what's not actually mentioned on the process, on the forms themselves. We understand what you need to do in order to be eligible and the requirements for each and every grant. We know what the primary officer is looking for innovative and interesting technology which fits his needs. We know what's changed since the opportunity was first made available. As I mentioned, in BAAs, which are open over a 5-year period, this is key to receiving substantial funding. And we employ a multi-submission strategy, which nets 2/3 of our clients substantial awards. We don't stop at one grant. Working with us, we're confident that you're going to love our service, so we offer 3 separate contract cycles without clauses at the end of each of them. First one is very standard understanding of your project, its needs, and identifying the different grant opportunities that are out there in the different federal agencies. We call this the strategic assessment period, after which it's followed by the first round of submissions. That's where we write the grant submission together, and we get it out there, and then we get another one out there, and we make corrections, and we get it out there again. And then the third stage is the second round of submissions. We have a proven track record of success with more than $1.5 billion in awards won to date. We have over 400 submissions annually, reflective of the amount of companies that we work with. And 2/3 of our multi-submission candidates win awards each year. So, as I mentioned earlier, in 2018, there's $151 billion available in federal funds for research and development. Of that, upwards of $60 billion available for the private industry. In 2017, the numbers were fairly similar, not far off. Companies very similar to yours have already received federal funding for their projects and are continuing to receive in 2018. We offer you a chance to gain the competitive edge and to find success using the federal system to fund your R&D. Two key restrictions that we need to mention when talking about federal grants. A lot of people ask me, Josh, it sounds too good to be true. There must be some key restrictions. There are, but they're not so difficult to deal with. The first one is an act that was enacted in 1980 called the Bayh-Dole Act, where the government maintains march-in rights. This has never been used. In the 38 years since the Bayh-Dole Act was enacted, it's never once been used. It's the government's way of encouraging you to secure a patent. Like I said before, the government has no control. They don't add any advisors. They don't usurp your IP rights or infringe on your control of your company in any way, shape, or form. But they reserve the right to march in if you don't secure your development with a patent, which is key. It's an investment for the government. They want to make sure that it succeeds, and they don't want somebody else to go and develop your product or your technological advancement before you do. On top of that, second restriction is the accounting procedures. You need to have separate accounting procedures for your R&D expenses. This is especially important for companies that are already to market, already have a product out there which they're selling. You can't use federal money in order to fund your existing company, but you can use federal funding to fund all of your R&D expenses for whatever new product, software, technology that you're trying to develop. In summary, there's a lot of money in federal grants. Grants provide a tremendous amount of financial freedom without anything in return. Our team at Equal Point and our strategy open up the doors to long-term financial stability for your R&D. And as I mentioned, there's direct response and there's also the indirect response. People are going to view federal grants as the hallmark and the stamp of approval. So if you get your federal grant, you're also potentially set up, can't guarantee anything, but potentially set up for long-term financial stability, which goes beyond the grant terms themselves. And as I mentioned, with us, one grant is only the beginning. Just a mention of upcoming webinars and events that we're going to be attending. Next month, we're conducting a webinar called Federal Funding for Drones, which we're going to be focusing on drone development and R&D for drone-related research. The month after, in March, we're going to be conducting a webinar on autonomous cars and federal funding. And then on April 4th, we're going to be focusing more on small business innovation research, which, as I mentioned, is the backdoor to federal funding. We're also going to be attending the following events: the RSA conference in April, Red Hat Summit 2018, Tech Connect World 2018, and the Interdrone Conference of 2018. Stay tuned for more conferences and more upcoming webinars, which we will be conducting throughout the year. As I mentioned in the beginning, for anybody who came late to the webinar, my name is Josh Baron. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Eagle Point Funding. These are my contact details. I'm going to be sending them one by one to all the attendees of our webinar, as well as some helpful links. I just want to explain these helpful links while I have you on the line with me. It's important to know if your competition or companies that are similar to you have already received federal funding. I'm going to be sending you a link to usaspending.gov. This website contains all funding, I think going back at least 30 years, that is available, but certainly in the last 10 years you'll be able to find all the information of any company that has received federal funding in order to see who of your competition or companies similar to yours that have already received federal funding and how much they've received to date. You can also research on your own the myriad of opportunities at grants.gov. And my parting message to you is very simple. You don't have to work with Eagle Point. I think we give you a competitive edge when it comes to the grant processes and also finding the opportunities. However, you must apply to the federal system in order to fund your projects, because grants have tremendous advantages that you will not find in any other type of funding route. Non-dilutive funding grants your company and your projects such incredible freedom, whether it's within equity or with control over your company, that it's too good of an opportunity to miss. So if you don't want to work with us, absolutely fine. Make sure you find the opportunities yourself. Thank you for joining our webinar, and have a great day.